I want to ask you something before we begin today. When was the last time you went 2 full weeks without eating sugar? Not just without candy or dessert, without bread, without pasta, without crackers, without juice, without the hidden sugars tucked inside dozens of foods that most people eat every single day without ever thinking twice about it. For most people over 60, the honest answer is never. And I understand why. Sugar is everywhere. It is woven into the food supply, into social occasions, into comfort and habit and routine. Giving it up, even temporarily, feels like an enormous sacrifice. But what if I told you that the changes your body would go through in just 14 days without sugar are so significant, so visible, so physically measurable that most people who experience them never want to go back? Today I am going to walk you through exactly what happens inside your body when you eliminate sugar for 2 weeks. Not in vague generalities, not in abstract health language, specifically, organ by organ, system by system, day by day. And by the time we finish, I think you are going to look at your next meal very differently than you do right now. I am Dr. James. Welcome back to Senior Vitality Secrets, the channel dedicated to giving you honest, research-backed health information that actually applies to your life after 60. Before we dive in, the standard and important reminder. Everything I share today is for educational purposes. It is not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Please speak with your doctor before making significant changes to your diet, and particularly before adjusting any medication you are currently taking. Now, let us begin. The first thing you will notice: your face will change shape. I want to start here because this is the change that surprises people the most, and it happens faster than almost anyone expects. Within the first week of eliminating sugar, many people notice that their face begins to look different. The roundness softens. The puffiness around the eyes and cheeks diminishes. The jawline becomes more defined. Features that were somewhat obscured by fluid retention and inflammation begin to re-emerge. This is not vanity. This is your body communicating something very important to you through a visible signal. The roundness and puffiness most people attribute to simply getting older or to their natural face shape is in large part the visible result of chronic inflammation and fluid retention driven by excess sugar and carbohydrate consumption. Here is the biology behind it. When you eat sugar and refined carbohydrates, your body stores the resulting glucose as glycogen in your liver and muscles. For every gram of glycogen stored, your body also stores approximately 3 grams of water alongside it. Stored sugar is, at the biological level, a fluid-filled sponge. When that sugar is present throughout your tissues, so is a significant amount of retained water. The puffiness you see in the mirror is partly that retained water expressing itself in the soft tissues of your face. When you cut sugar out, your body begins drawing down those glycogen stores and releasing the water bound to them. The puffiness recedes. The inflammation that was contributing to tissue swelling throughout your face begins to calm. And within days, many people can see a measurable difference in how they look. The same process happens in your midsection, and I want to spend time explaining exactly why that is, because it is more important than simple aesthetics. When you eliminate sugar, your liver is one of the first organs to respond. Your liver, under conditions of excess carbohydrate and sugar intake, has been storing fat. In fact, most of the fat accumulation in the liver of a person eating the standard modern diet came not from dietary fat, but from carbohydrates, specifically from grains, refined starches, bread, pasta, and sugar in all its forms. The liver converts excess glucose into fat and stores it locally. This is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease when it becomes significant. And it is far more common among people over 60 than most people realize. When sugar is removed from your diet, your liver is finally forced to begin releasing and burning that stored fat. Your body, deprived of its preferred and immediately available fuel source, begins drawing on its fat reserves, and the stored fat in the midsection, surrounding your organs and within the liver itself, begins to mobilize. To understand why this happens so reliably, you need to understand something fundamental about how your body prioritizes its fuel sources. Your body has 2 primary fuel sources available to it: sugar, in the form of glucose and glycogen, and fat in the form of stored triglycerides and fatty acids. When both are available, your body will always choose sugar first. It is the more readily accessible fuel, Burning it requires less metabolic machinery, so as long as sugar is consistently available, your body burns it and largely ignores the fat reserves sitting in your liver, your abdomen, and throughout your body. When you remove sugar from the equation entirely, your body has no choice. It must learn, or more accurately relearn, how to run on fat fuel. And once that metabolic shift begins, the body starts working through fat reserves that may have been accumulating for years or even decades. The midsection shrinks, the liver begins to clear, the face changes shape, and this is just day 1 through 3. What happens to your 4 most affected organs? Now, let me take you deeper, because the changes happening on the surface of your body are only a small reflection of what is happening internally. There are 4 organs that respond most dramatically when sugar is removed from the diet, and each of them tells an important story about what excess sugar has been doing to your health over time. The eyes. Your eyes are extraordinarily sensitive to blood sugar, more sensitive, in fact, than most other organs in the body. This is precisely why one of the first and most serious complications of diabetes is a condition called diabetic retinopathy, which is progressive damage to the retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of the eye that is essential for vision. The retina is fed by a dense network of tiny, delicate blood vessels. These small vessels are among the first casualties of chronically elevated blood sugar. Excess glucose creates what researchers describe as a glycation effect, essentially a slow chemical damage to proteins and blood vessel walls throughout the body. In the eyes, this manifests as blurred vision, difficulty focusing, reduced contrast sensitivity, and over time, potentially serious vision loss. When you eliminate sugar, the inflammatory damage to these delicate vessels begins to ease. The blurriness that many people have attributed to aging or to needing new glasses often improves noticeably within the first 2 weeks of removing sugar. Clarity improves, contrast sharpens. Tired, strained eyes begin to feel more comfortable. For people who are pre-diabetic or managing type 2 diabetes, this visual improvement can be one of the most immediately noticeable and motivating changes during the first 2 weeks of dietary change. The kidneys. Your kidneys are another organ that sustains significant damage from prolonged exposure to high blood sugar. The condition is called diabetic nephropathy, a term that comes from the word nephron, which refers to the tiny individual filtering units that make up the kidney's structure. Each kidney contains approximately 1 million nephrons, each of which is supplied by its own small blood vessels. When blood sugar is chronically elevated, those small vessels become inflamed, thickened, and damaged over time. The kidney's ability to filter waste efficiently deteriorates. Protein begins appearing in the urine, which is a sign that the filtration barrier has been compromised. In advanced cases, kidney function can decline to the point where dialysis becomes necessary. When sugar is removed from the diet, the inflammation driving this damage begins to resolve. The blood vessels feeding the nephrons are no longer being subjected to the same chemical assault from excess glucose. Kidney function, measured in part by biomarkers like creatinine and glomerular filtration rate, begins to stabilize and in many cases improve. One of the most practically noticeable signs of this is a reduction in nighttime urination. If you find yourself getting up multiple times during the night to use the bathroom, which is an extremely common experience for people with elevated blood sugar or diabetes, that pattern exists for a specific biological reason. Water follows sugar. As your kidneys work to filter excess glucose out of your bloodstream, they pull water along with it, increasing urine volume and urgency. When sugar is removed from the diet and blood glucose levels begin to normalize, the kidneys are no longer processing that excess sugar load, and the urgency to urinate diminishes significantly, often within the first week or 2. In my years of clinical practice, I worked with patients who were getting up 8, 9, 10 times every single night. We made no other changes except reducing sugar and carbohydrates in their diet. Within a few weeks, they were sleeping through the night. The impact on their quality of life was profound. Sleep quality affects everything, including blood sugar regulation itself, creating a beneficial cycle. The arteries. This is where the long-term life or death stakes come into focus. Excess sugar in the bloodstream does not simply pass through harmlessly on its way to being excreted. It reacts with the proteins lining the walls of your blood vessels through a process called glycation. Imagine the inner surface of your arteries as a smooth, flexible tube designed to carry blood efficiently throughout your body. Now, imagine that tube gradually becoming rougher, stiffer, and thicker on the inside. That is what chronic excess glucose does to arterial walls over years of exposure. The inflammation that builds inside your arteries as a result of chronic high blood sugar makes those walls progressively thicker, and as the walls thicken, the space available for blood to flow through narrows. Plaque deposits, which your body produces in part as a response to the damaged arterial lining, begin to accumulate. The risk of arterial blockages, heart attack, and stroke rises steadily. There is another dimension to this that is frequently overlooked. Excess sugar does not only convert to fat in your liver, it also drives the production of cholesterol in ways that are genuinely harmful. The type of cholesterol particles produced in the context of high sugar consumption tend to be small, dense, and particularly damaging to arterial walls. When patients see their cholesterol numbers improve dramatically after reducing sugar, this is the mechanism behind that change. When you eliminate sugar, the inflammatory assault on your arteries begins to ease. The glycation damage stops accumulating at the same rate. Your arteries gradually begin to recover some of their natural flexibility. Blood pressure, which is elevated in part by arterial stiffness and inflammation, begins to come down. For many people, measurable reductions in blood pressure can occur within 2 to 4 weeks of eliminating sugar. The nervous system and the brain. This is the benefit that many people find most personally meaningful because the changes are so immediately noticeable in daily life. Your nervous system, including the nerves throughout your body, and the extraordinary complexity of your brain, is acutely sensitive to excess glucose. In people with diabetes or prediabetes, a condition called peripheral neuropathy develops as the small blood vessels feeding the nerves in the extremities are damaged by chronic high blood sugar. The nerves in the feet and lower legs are typically affected first, producing sensations of burning, tingling, numbness, or pain. These sensations can make walking uncomfortable and significantly impact quality of life. When sugar is removed and blood glucose levels begin to normalize, those damaged nerves begin the slow process of healing. The inflammation-suppressing nerve function begins to resolve. Many people notice improvements in the sensation and comfort of their feet within weeks of making this dietary change. But the more immediately noticeable changes for most people happen in the brain. Cognitive function, which includes memory, focus, mental clarity, the ability to concentrate on a task without mental fatigue, tends to improve substantially when sugar is eliminated. Many people over 60 have attributed their mental fogginess, their difficulty remembering words or names, their reduced ability to concentrate entirely to the natural aging process. In many cases, a significant portion of that cognitive decline is driven by the chronic effects of high blood sugar and high insulin on brain tissue. The brain is an energy-intensive organ. It is also sensitive to the quality of the fuel it receives. When your blood sugar is constantly fluctuating between sharp spikes and subsequent crashes, your brain is riding that same roller coaster. The instability affects concentration, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and mental stamina. When sugar is eliminated and your brain begins receiving a steadier, more consistent energy supply, the improvement in cognitive clarity can feel remarkable. Many people describe it as a mental fog lifting. Thoughts become sharper, memory becomes more reliable, the ability to focus on a task extends, and perhaps most meaningfully for overall quality of life, mood improves significantly. The relationship between blood sugar stability and emotional well-being is direct and powerful. The energy revolution. Now, let me address something that stops many people before they even begin. The fear that giving up sugar will leave you feeling depleted, weak, and exhausted. I understand where that fear comes from. For most people who have spent decades fueling their bodies primarily with carbohydrates and sugar, removing that fuel source does feel disorienting in the first few days. There can be a transitional period of 2 to 4 days, sometimes called the adaptation phase, during which your body is shifting its metabolic machinery from primarily burning glucose to primarily burning fat. During those few days, some people experience fatigue, mild headaches, or increased irritability. This is temporary, and it is a sign that your body is making the shift you are asking it to make. It is not a sign that something is wrong. Here is what is waiting for you on the other side of that transition, and this is one of the most important things I can share with you today. Your body carries two types of stored fuel: glycogen, which is stored sugar, and body fat. The average person, even someone of relatively lean build, carries approximately 1,700 calories of stored glycogen. That is your small emergency fuel tank. The same average person carries approximately 100,000 calories of stored fat. That is your large fuel reservoir, the one your body has been largely ignoring because sugar was always available and easier to burn. 100,000 calories of stored fuel versus 1,700. That comparison alone explains why energy feels so different when your body learns to run on fat. When you are primarily burning sugar, your energy is fundamentally unstable. You eat, blood sugar rises, insulin responds, blood sugar drops, energy crashes, hunger returns. You eat again. This cycle repeats every few hours throughout the entire day. Energy is never truly steady. Hunger is never truly satisfied. Cravings dominate the experience of eating. When your body transitions to burning fat as its primary fuel, the cycle breaks. Between meals, rather than running out of accessible energy and triggering hunger and cravings, your body simply continues drawing on its vast fat reserves. Energy becomes steady and sustained throughout the day. Hunger diminishes dramatically because your body is being continuously fed by its own stored resources. Mental clarity improves because your brain is receiving a consistent, stable energy supply rather than riding the glucose roller coaster. Many people over 60 who make this transition describe it as the first time in their adult lives that they have experienced energy without the afternoon crash, without the desperate need for a snack 2 hours after every meal, without waking up tired despite sleeping 8 hours. The stability of fat-based energy is fundamentally different from the instability of sugar-based energy, and for most people, the experience is transformative. The disappearance of cravings. One of the most common objections I hear when I suggest reducing sugar is this: I could never give up sugar. I crave it too much. The cravings would be unbearable. I want to address that directly because it reveals a misunderstanding about how sugar cravings actually work. The craving for sugar is not a character weakness. It is not a lack of willpower. It is a biological response to the metabolic state that sugar creates. Here is the mechanism. When you eat sugar regularly, your blood glucose spikes. Insulin responds to bring it down. Blood glucose drops, sometimes below the level you started at. Your body detects the drop and sends hunger and craving signals to motivate you to eat more sugar and restore blood glucose. This creates a feedback loop of craving, eating, spiking, crashing, and craving again that is driven entirely by the presence of sugar in your diet. When you remove the sugar, the loop breaks. Within approximately 3 days of consistent sugar avoidance, the craving signals diminish dramatically, not because you are exerting heroic willpower against them, but because the biological mechanism generating them is no longer being triggered. The cravings quiet down because there is nothing keeping them active. After 3 days, most people find that foods they previously craved intensely hold much less appeal. The obsessive pull towards sweet foods, the feeling that you cannot be satisfied without something sweet after a meal, gradually releases. This process happens at the biochemical level, not the willpower level. And that is an important distinction, because it means this is genuinely achievable for most people regardless of how powerful their current cravings feel. The practical threshold to aim for during this period is keeping total carbohydrate intake below 50 grams per day. This includes not just obvious sugars, but all refined carbohydrates including bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, rice, and the hidden sugars in condiments, sauces, and processed foods. It also includes high-sugar fruits, honey, and other natural sweeteners. Consider what the average American actually consumes each day in terms of sugar. The average person takes in approximately 13.5 teaspoons of added sugar daily. That is 54 grams of sugar before accounting for anything else. But added sugar is genuinely just the beginning. When you add the sugar produced in your body from other carbohydrate sources, bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, rice, potatoes, waffles, pastries, alcoholic beverages, juices, and sodas, the total sugar load reaching your bloodstream each day works out to approximately half a pound of actual sugar, 275 grams, nearly 69 teaspoons. That is the scale of what the modern diet is asking your body to manage every single day. And for the pancreas, for the liver, for the blood vessels and kidneys and nerves, that is an extraordinary and sustained burden. Inflammation, pain, and stiffness. Something else happens when you eliminate sugar that many people do not anticipate, and it affects not just their blood sugar numbers, but their physical comfort and mobility on a daily basis. Chronic inflammation, which is driven significantly by excess glucose and insulin in the bloodstream, is not only an internal, invisible process. It expresses itself physically as joint stiffness, muscle soreness, general achiness, and the kind of low-grade physical discomfort that many people over 60 have simply accepted as an unavoidable feature of aging. When sugar is eliminated and systemic inflammation begins to decline, many people notice a meaningful reduction in joint pain and morning stiffness. The inflammation that was contributing to discomfort throughout their body is no longer being fed by the same constant supply of its primary trigger. Movements that felt stiff and uncomfortable become easier. The need for over-the-counter pain medications, which many seniors take daily for joint pain and inflammation, often decreases. The arteries, as I described earlier, become less stiff. Blood flows more easily. Blood pressure comes down. The cardiovascular system begins operating with less resistance and less strain. And the deep internal inflammation, the kind you cannot feel directly, but that your laboratory markers reveal, begins to resolve. C-reactive protein, which is one of the most reliable biomarkers of systemic inflammation, tends to fall meaningfully within weeks of reducing sugar and refined carbohydrates. This internal anti-inflammatory shift is one of the most important long-term benefits of eliminating sugar, and it underlies many of the other improvements I have been describing. Weight loss, real fat loss, not just water weight. When most people think about the relationship between sugar and weight, they think primarily about calories, but the relationship is more complex and more interesting than simple calorie counting suggests. In the first week, 1 to 2 weeks of eliminating sugar, most people lose a significant amount of weight. A portion of this initial weight loss is water weight. And I want to explain why that happens so you are not confused by the rapidity of the early change. As I explained earlier, stored glycogen holds approximately 3 times its own weight in water. When you cut sugar from your diet, your body begins drawing down those glycogen stores to fuel itself through the adaptation phase. As the glycogen depletes, the water bound to it is released and excreted. This can produce a weight loss of 8 to 13 pounds within the first 1 to 2 weeks. It is not fat loss at this stage primarily. It is your body releasing the water that was stored alongside its sugar reserves. But this initial change matters for reasons beyond the scale reading. Losing that excess stored fluid reduces the burden on your joints, eases the feeling of heaviness and bloating, and often produces a noticeable improvement in how you feel physically, which motivates the continued commitment to the dietary change. What follows after that initial water weight loss is the genuinely transformative part. Your body, now running primarily on fat fuel, begins steadily drawing on your actual fat reserves. Unlike the water weight loss, which happens rapidly and then plateaus, true fat loss continues steadily over weeks and months as long as sugar and excess carbohydrates remain low. This is fundamentally different from the experience of trying to lose weight on a high carbohydrate diet. When carbohydrates are high, insulin levels are high, and insulin is the primary storage hormone in your body. It signals your cells to store energy, not release it. Trying to lose fat while insulin is chronically elevated is, metabolically speaking, swimming against the current. The body is receiving constant signals to store energy, even as you are consciously trying to create a deficit. When sugar and carbohydrates are low, insulin levels normalize. The storage signals diminish, and the body is free to mobilize and burn its fat reserves in a way that feels natural and sustainable rather than a constant struggle. The cravings that make high carbohydrate dieting so difficult, the hunger between meals, the obsessive thoughts about food, the feeling of deprivation that eventually leads most people to abandon their dietary efforts, are largely absent in the low-sugar metabolic state because the body is being continuously fed by its own fat reserves between meals. How to begin? A practical starting point. Before I close today, I want to give you something concrete, not an overwhelming protocol, not a complicated system, a simple, clear starting point. For the next 14 days, bring your total carbohydrate intake below 50 grams per day. This includes added sugar in all its forms: bread, pasta, cereal, rice, crackers, potatoes, most fruit, juice, soda, alcohol, and the hidden sugars and processed foods. Read ingredient labels. Sugar has over 50 different names on food labels. Anything ending in OS, any word containing syrup, any form of corn sweetener, honey, agave, dextrose, maltose, all of it. Focus your eating on proteins, healthy fats, non-starchy vegetables, and whole foods that do not spike your blood sugar. Eggs, fish, chicken, leafy greens, avocado, olive oil, nuts, and seeds. These foods provide nutrition without triggering the insulin cascade that drives the problems we discussed today. For the first 3 to 4 days, expect that your body will push back. You may feel tired, mildly headachy, or irritable as it transitions its fuel source. Drink adequate water. Add a small amount of sea salt to your food. As sodium balance shifts during the early adaptation period, rest when you need to. These symptoms are temporary and are a sign that the metabolic shift is happening. By day 5 or 6 for most people, the transition is largely complete. Energy begins to stabilize. Cravings diminish. Mental clarity starts to improve. The face begins to change. Sleep becomes deeper. The bathroom trips at night become fewer. By day 14, the changes I have described throughout this video will be measurably underway in your body. Not complete, not finished, but genuinely, meaningfully in motion. And here is what I want you to carry forward from today. This is not a 2-week experiment. 2 weeks is the door. What is waiting on the other side of that door is a sustained relationship with your own metabolic health that produces compounding benefits for as long as you maintain it. The energy improvements deepen over months. The insulin sensitivity restoration continues. The inflammation reduction extends to systems throughout your body that you may not even be aware have been compromised. The path back to metabolic health is not complicated. It does not require expensive supplements, pharmaceutical interventions, or exhaustive exercise programs. It begins with one decision: the decision to stop feeding the process that has been causing the damage and to give your body the conditions it needs to begin healing itself. At Senior Vitality Secrets, we believe that this kind of information should be freely available to everyone, not locked behind prescription pads, not buried in medical literature that most people will never read, not withheld because it does not serve a commercial interest. You deserve to know what your body is capable of when you work with it rather than against it. If today's video gave you something useful, something practical that you will think about the next time you sit down to a meal, please share it with someone you care about. A spouse, a sibling, a friend who is managing diabetes or struggling with their weight or living with fatigue they have simply accepted as part of getting older. Subscribe to Senior Vitality Secrets so you never miss a new video, and leave me a comment below. Tell me which of these benefits surprised you the most. Tell me what question this video raised for you. I read every comment, and your questions shape the content I create next. In our next video, we are going to explore something that affects almost every person over 60 and yet is almost never directly addressed in standard medical care: the connection between muscle loss, metabolism, and blood sugar control, and the specific foods and habits that protect and rebuild the muscle tissue that keeps your entire metabolic system functioning as it should. Until then, take care of your body. Start where you are. Make one change this week, and remember that the most powerful medicine available to you is not in a pharmacy. It is in the choices you make 3 times a day, every day, for the rest of your life. I am Dr. James. This is Senior Vitality Secrets, and I will see you in the next video.